Have you ever felt the weight of an untouched dream? A silent promise to yourself that whispers in the quiet hours, but screams in agony when morning light exposes its neglect? We all have those aspirations, those projects that gleam like distant lighthouses. Yet our ships remain tethered to the shore, held captive by the invisible chains of procrastination. We tell ourselves we'll start tomorrow, or next week, or when the stars align perfectly, only to find tomorrow becomes a distant yesterday, and the stars remain stubbornly unaligned. But what if the secret to unlocking discipline isn't about monumental willpower or a sudden surge of motivation, but something far more subtle, something almost paradoxical? Let me tell you about John. John was a man who lived in the gentle hum of a small suburban town, his life a steady rhythm of work, family, and the occasional weekend barbecue. But beneath this placid surface, a vibrant current pulsed, a deep, unyielding desire to write. Not just any writing, but a sprawling, historical novel that had been incubating in his mind for years, its characters whispering their stories to him during his commute, its plot twists unfurling as he stared out his office window. He envisioned dusty libraries, the clash of ancient swords, and the complex dance of human ambition against the backdrop of a forgotten era. He even had a dedicated desk in his home office, a beautiful, sturdy oak piece inherited from his grandfather, adorned with a sleek laptop, crisp notebooks, and a fountain pen that felt significant in his hand. Yet, every evening, as the dinner dishes were cleared and his children settled into their bedtime routines, John would glance at that desk, a strange knot forming in his stomach. The blank page on his screen felt less like an invitation and more like a colossal, impassable wall. He'd tell himself, "Tonight, I'll dive in. I'll write for 2 hours, really make progress." But then the fatigue of the day would set in, or an urgent email would demand his attention, or a new series on his streaming service would beckon with siren-like allure. He'd find himself drifting, scrolling through social media, reading articles completely unrelated to his novel, anything to avoid the daunting silence of that blank page. The cursor would blink mockingly, a tiny white pulse against the sterile void, and John would sigh, pushing away the guilt, promising himself, tomorrow, definitely tomorrow. Weeks bled into months. The fountain pen lay uncapped, the notebooks untouched, the laptop screen reflecting only the dust motes dancing in the evening light. The novel, once a source of exhilarating anticipation, began to feel like a burden, a heavy cloak of failure draped over his shoulders. He started to doubt himself, his passion, even his ability to ever finish anything meaningful. The joy he once found in merely contemplating the story was replaced by a gnawing sense of inadequacy. He felt stuck in a loop, endlessly wanting to write, but perpetually failing to begin. One particularly crisp autumn morning, John found himself at the local coffee shop, nursing a lukewarm latte and staring blankly at the street outside. Through the condensation on the window, he noticed Mrs. Henderson, a woman in her late 70s, known for her vibrant community garden and her perpetually cheerful disposition. She was meticulously cleaning fallen leaves from around her rose bush, not with a large rake or an electric blower, but with a small hand trowel, carefully sweeping them into a canvas bag. It seemed like an incredibly inefficient method, a Sisyphean task given the sheer volume of leaves. Yet she moved with a quiet, unhurried grace, her focus absolute. Later that day, John saw her again, still at it, though now she was tending to a different section of the garden. Intrigued, he approached her, offering a hand with the raking. Mrs. Henderson smiled, a network of kind wrinkles crinkling around her eyes. "Oh, thank you, dear, but there's no need for that big rake," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I find a little bit each day is all it takes. Just 20 minutes, sometimes even 10, before my morning tea. I don't try to clear the whole garden in one go. That's a task for a younger woman, perhaps." She chuckled gently. "The important thing is, I do a little bit, and then the next day, I do a little bit more." Before you know it, the whole garden is ready for winter. She paused, looking at her neatly cleared patch. It's never about the speed, John. It's about the steady hand returning, day after day. Her words echoed in John's mind, a gentle chime against the loud clamor of his own self-criticism. The steady hand returning day after day. It was such a simple observation, yet it felt profound. He had been approaching his novel like a sprint, imagining himself powering through chapters in epic multi-hour sessions. But what if it was more like Mrs. Henderson's garden, a series of small, almost imperceptible efforts that, over time, transformed the landscape? That evening, John sat at his oak desk, but this time, he didn't tell himself he had to write for 2 hours. He didn't even tell himself he had to write a single coherent sentence. Instead, he made a tiny, almost laughable commitment. He would simply open the laptop, open his novel's document, and look at it for 5 minutes. No pressure to type, no expectation of brilliance, just 5 minutes of quiet presence. He set a timer on his phone. The first evening, he sat there, staring at the blinking cursor, his mind still buzzing with the day's anxieties. 5 minutes passed. He closed the laptop, a strange, almost imperceptible sense of accomplishment settling over him. He had shown up. He had honored the small commitment. The next night, he repeated the ritual. This time, after 3 minutes of simply looking, an idea for a character's name suddenly popped into his head. He typed it down almost without thinking. Then, true to his 5-minute rule, he closed the laptop. He had written something. Something tiny, but something. Over the next few weeks, John continued this small dance. Sometimes he'd just open the document. Sometimes he'd read a paragraph he'd written years ago. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, those 5 minutes stretched. On particularly inspired evenings, he might find himself typing for 15 minutes or even 20. He wasn't aiming for perfection. He was aiming for presence. He wasn't trying to conquer the novel. He was simply showing up to the battlefield, even if just to survey the terrain. There were days, of course, when the old demons resurfaced. Work would pile up, family emergencies would demand his attention, or simply, the sheer lethargy of a long day would threaten to pull him under. He'd miss a day, sometimes 2, occasionally even 3. The old guilt would try to creep back in, whispering, "See? You're a failure. You can't stick to anything." But now, he had Mrs. Henderson's words. He pictured her patiently sweeping leaves. "The only real problem is never coming back," she had said. So instead of spiraling into self-recrimination, John would simply return to his desk the next available evening. He wouldn't dwell on the missed days. He would just open the laptop, open the document, and commit to his small 5 minutes. And almost always, the act of simply showing up, even for that brief, non-threatening interval, was enough to rekindle the spark. The momentum, however fragile, would begin to build again. Months turned into a year. John's novel didn't magically write itself overnight. There were still challenging chapters, moments of self-doubt, and paragraphs that needed to be rewritten countless times. But the blank page no longer felt like an impenetrable wall. It felt like a canvas, waiting for his small, consistent strokes. He wasn't racing against time. He was flowing with it, contributing his small portion each day. The novel grew, not in sudden bursts, but in a slow, steady accretion of words, like geological layers forming a mountain range. One evening, nearly 2 years after he first spoke with Mrs. Henderson, John typed the final words of his historical novel. The clock on his screen showed it was just past midnight. He leaned back in his chair, not with the triumphant roar he had once imagined, but with a profound sense of quiet satisfaction. The oak desk still stood, the fountain pen still rested beside the laptop, but the screen now displayed a complete manuscript. It wasn't perfect. No first draft ever is, but it was done. He hadn't tricked his brain into loving discipline through brute force. He had gently coaxed it, befriended it, by making the act of starting so small, so non-threatening, that resistance had no ground to stand on. He understood now that discipline wasn't about a constant surge of motivation. It was about the ritual of returning, about honoring the small promise to show up, even when the energy wasn't there. It was about consistently putting one foot in front of the other, knowing that the journey of 1,000 miles truly begins with a single step, repeated again and again. John learned that the secret to discipline isn't about overcoming a mountain in one heroic leap. It's about recognizing that the mountain is made of countless pebbles, and each day you pick up just one. And in that consistent, humble act, you transform yourself, your habits, and ultimately, your deepest aspirations into a quiet, enduring reality. So, what is that aspiration whispering to you? What project calls to your heart or remains perpetually on the horizon? Perhaps it's not about finding the motivation to climb the entire mountain today. Perhaps, like John, like Mrs. Henderson, it's about picking up just one small pebble. Just 5 minutes. Just a single sentence. Just a small, consistent act of returning. You might be surprised at the magnificent landscapes you can create, one small step at a time. If John's story resonated with you, and if you're ready to explore more insights into mastering your mind and achieving your potential, remember to subscribe to Deep Mind Portal for more deeply researched stories and transformative ideas. Your journey to a more disciplined, fulfilling life starts now.